The Earth is in ruins. The landscape is blanketed by a toxic sea of ash, leaving only the highest stratosphere safe for human survival. We can only assume the human race has messed everything up and fled the scene of the crime. But some people want answers. You want answers. Captaining your trusty airship, you'll scavenge any buildings you can find jutting out past the layer of toxic nastiness. You'll amass resources, upgrade your vessel, and equip yourself till you're capable of descending below the smog to find out what in the hell is going on. ForeverSkies is an interesting concept, and on the more unique side of open-world survival games. But is it any good? Is it all promise with no panache? Stick around as I tell you whether this exciting new game is worth your time and hard-earned money. So, first question, who, what, and why is ForeverSkies? This is an open-world survival game with a big emphasis on improving and managing a mobile base. You'll need to do all the things that we as human beings need to do to survive. Eat, sleep, breathe, stave off diseases, and once you've found a foothold, you'll build up and upgrade your base and progress your character and airship in a bunch of different ways. The game is split between two, let's call them biomes. The dividing line is this rolling ocean of toxic gas. Above this, you're mostly perfectly safe. Up here, you'll sail around the skies, stopping off at buildings and gathering resources. If you get too close to the dividing line, things will get dicey. To access all the goodies that lie beneath the danger zone, you'll have to find specific lifts that will take you down to the surface, to an alien world of hazardous flora and toxic air. That's where all the danger is, so you'll be making short trips, scrounging up materials to bring back to your airship. And that's the basic loop. Float around up here, scurry around down there. Both areas play out differently. They have different goals and feel worlds apart. It kind of feels a bit like the love child of Subnautica and Raft. You can't really get far by staying in one place, and the base building is a core function of the gameplay loop. If you're a fan of those titles, you'll feel right at home here. It's also planned as a cooperative title, so those of you looking for a multiplayer survival game, this may well be what you're looking for. But that isn't in the game yet. Right now, we've just got the bare bones, but here's what you can expect to find currently. So, as of release, the game features a pretty robust foundation of its entire gameplay loop. In the sky biome, there's a range of different buildings to stop off at, and on the surface, there's a decent amount to get stuck into. There's also the makings of a story tying the two regions together, and I think about 8 hours of the gameplay time is a pretty fair estimate if you were going to install it and play it right now. You could stretch that time a fair bit longer if you were going to stop off at every point of interest you come across, and really dive deep into the airship building mechanics. Gameplay-wise, I like how it plays for the most part. Outside of some frustrating movement here and there, it initially feels very well designed and thoughtfully implemented. The first hour or two will see you try and manage some very unforgiving health and water meters, so getting your supplies in order is a top priority. You'll dangle lures off the side of your ship to try and hook some dinner, which in most cases usually ends up being half a dozen boiled moths. Yum. There's a few other additions that do help give it its own sense of identity. While you're burrowing around and stuffing weird creatures and plants in your mouth, you might pick up a disease or two. The effects range from sensitivity to light all the way to hallucinations. These are curable, but they'll require you to scan items in the world and look for another thing to cram into your gob to counteract the first thing. It reminded me a bit of the ailment system from Green Hell, and it's nice to have this extra added layer of depth. You'll quickly work out that you'll have to prepare food properly, rather than just eating vast amounts of raw ingredients, which is also just quite a good skill for life, really. So the survival side of things is good, and while it can be tough, it won't stop your progression. And that's always make or break with this genre. If you don't feel like you're learning new recipes or working towards something, things can quickly feel stagnant. The good news is, this didn't feel like that at all. I was constantly learning new schematics and having personal goals to justify hunting resources for. That said, just a reminder that the amount of content is relatively thin right now, so the progression won't keep going and going, but it will keep up with you for what's currently in the game. And when they add more story goals, I'm sure that they'll add more interesting ways to keep you progressing. The whole game also just felt dangerous, which is odd because really, there isn't any danger at all. There's no real enemies or unexpected pitfalls just around the corner. Your biggest danger is yourself, forgetting to feed yourself or falling off a skyscraper. I think it's a pretty good sign that I felt this lurking threat, despite knowing it didn't actually exist. And I can imagine once they add in some actual enemies, things will feel quite tense. So, those are all the things I like, and there's a whole bunch of legitimate and important things that show a well-designed game with a lot of thought put into it. But they all seem balanced out by one minor annoyance that I really couldn't get past: storage and inventory management. Now, I had a whole lengthy rant penned out for this, but I deleted it and I'm just going to keep it short. It needs some changes. Trying to find space for any item became a headache and a chore, to the point where I simply didn't want to gather more resources because I had nowhere to put things. But with that gripe out of the way, let's talk about the game's graphics. Now, my first impression of this was really solid. I mentioned it before, but it really does remind me of Subnautica. There's a fair bit going on to make your views from the ship feel interesting. The textures all feel really solid, and it feels good to play. But the more I played, the more I kept fixating on the things that started to bug me. Those particle effects that I initially thought really helped make the skyline feel more varied started to just feel busy. It's like there's too many little movements on the screen, so you just can't really take much in. The assets, while they felt very deliberate, still felt very, I don't know, they felt very Unreal Engine. I know they were handmade for the game, and I know I haven't seen those exact models before, but it felt like I'd seen enough similar pieces that they didn't fully stand out. To sort of illustrate this, let's look at 3 other survival games currently in early access. Here's Valheim, The Forest, and Void Train. All of these feel very visually unique. They're individual, something that I thought ForeverSkies didn't quite have. Although there's still time for the devs to add in its own sense of flair and identity. Saying that though, there were some elements of the visual and audio design that really did feel special. Being caught in a thunderstorm was actually pretty incredible. I knew I was in danger, but I couldn't help but stop and take it all in. If the game has more moments like that, they could be enough to set this game apart. Something that makes the game feel post-apocalyptic rather than just using that setting because it makes sense to. The other good note is that I barely ran into any bugs at all. There were a few graphical hiccups, but I'll be honest, I wasn't sure if that was down to an actual issue or a side effect of the diseases I was constantly suffering from. I couldn't stop myself from just eating all the raw vegetables I came across. There's also a bit of an issue with optimization and the game not running quite as well as it should have done. But those sort of things will always come later in the early access cycle. To be fair to the devs, it's already on their radar. On the startup screen, there's a big old warning saying that the game has not been optimized for higher resolutions. I obviously chose to ignore, so that one's kind of on me. So that's what we've got right now. But let's peek into the future. What's this game going to become? The developers were quick to share their vision for the future of the game, and it seems like a lot of what they're planning addresses some issues that I've already talked about. Their new systems like gardening will really help with hunger and thirst management, and give you more of a reason to build up your base. New story additions will provide more objectives, and extra research branches will keep the strong progression going as the game expands. I said I liked the fact that the world felt dangerous without it actually being so. The devs will really up that threat when they add in combat and enemies. Whether they have the same level of tension as Subnautica in mind is TBC, but I'd like to see it. Roaming around the surface feels dangerous, but it will feel a lot more so knowing there could always be some big nasty ready to pounce on me. In terms of development times, they're aiming for a major patch every 3 to 4 months, with the entire early access period lasting about a year, which is honestly on the faster side of things for survival games. Early access phases usually last anywhere between 2 years and indefinitely. It could seem like a big ask to pull this together, especially given that the developers don't have any other games to their name, but I strangely have confidence in them. The game is made by Far From Home. They may be fairly new on the circuit, but this Polish studio certainly aren't amateurs. Their team has experience working on huge studio titles from League of Legends to Dying Light. The world of hard and fast deadlines will be nothing new to them, so I've got a pretty solid feeling that we're going to see big gains from them in little time. Okay, so you've made it this far. Surely you're ready for the verdict? Well, 2 things I want to address before that. The first is the price. This game will set you back about €29, $30, or 24 lovely Great British pounds. That said though, it launched with a 20% discount, and we'll probably see more of those discounts to coincide with content patches. Discounts aside, it's still a lot for an early access game, but maybe it's worth it. Well, you'll find out right after I get my board of buying inningness. That'll be a great opportunity for you to click that like and subscribe button. All right, here we go. So, ForeverSkies, do you buy it now? Do you wait for an update? Hold off till release, or just avoid the game entirely? Well, I'm pretty confident with this one. I think you should wait for updates. This to me is a no-brainer. So what we have here is a really great concept for a survival game. It plays well, it's thinking outside the box, and there's enough content to keep you busy for a bit. But there's a few key things. The exploration and the base building. That can be difficult to engage with for several reasons. But if they add some variety to the exploration, it will heighten that drive to stop off at all these little landmarks. I'm currently here flying in my airship and I see the tip of a skyscraper. I know what's going to be there. I know exactly what resources I'll get, so unless I desperately need them, I'm just going to keep floating by. And that takes away a huge part of the game. The other big draw is the base building / ship design. I didn't feel like there was a reason to do it other than just building for the sake of it. Once they added more purpose to that, I'll feel driven by it. That whole aspect gets filtered into my progression plan, rather than just sitting on the sidelines. But that's all moot if they don't sort out the storage and inventory management. They need to fix that. It will completely kill your buzz. So with those two aspects being improved, then that's a solid foundation, and I would 100% recommend hopping on this, especially if we see progress in multiplayer too. I've kind of glanced over that aspect, but this game feels like it'd be a lot of fun with friends. Think Raft, but you can push people off a blimp. What's not to like? So, I'd say if this game is really ticking a lot of boxes for you, hey, I'm not going to stop you jumping in now, but I would very strongly suggest you scooch back a little bit and check in every now and then. A few months down the line and we see improvements to explorable structures, base building, and extra ship features. I'd say that's the time to really sink your teeth in. And there we go, that's ForeverSkies, a solid game with a bright future. Give this a few months to cook and then grab a bib and tuck in. If you've had your eye on this game so far, let me know in the comment section below. Or if there are any other early access titles you want to see picked apart and reviewed on a clunky metal board, comment me their names and maybe they'll find their way onto my flexible friend. But for now, adios.